It's time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France with our very own Florence Villeminot. Hi, Flo. And when you think of the stereotypical French person, there's really a picture that comes to mind. They've got a beret, maybe a glass of wine, and often a cigarette. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How true is that stereotype? And is France really a nation of chain smokers?
Well, tourists often say it's the very first culture shock they experience when they visit France is just how smoky it is. And the truth is that attitudes to smoking and smokers are very different, for instance, compared to the United States. So you won't get a dirty look for lighting up in the street. And smoking is still very much associated with the arts rather than a lack of self-control. It's seen as being somewhat rebellious, a little bit romantic, a gesture that rejects a kind of puritanical situation where people are obsessed with self-improvement. Now, part of the reason that Anglophones might associate smoking with French people is because the English word cigarette comes from the French word cigarette, and it's our word du jour. Now, cigarette is actually a diminutive of the word cigare, which itself comes from the Spanish word cigarro. Now, cigarettes first became popular in France in the 1830s when Napoleonic soldiers brought them home from Spain.
Now, of course, smoking is bad for you, and throughout Europe, the number of people smoking has dropped significantly since the 1950s, and yet the image of France is still as a nation of heavy smokers.
Because there are a lot of people who smoke in France. If we take a look, actually, at some figures, in 2015, 16 million people said they smoked on a regular basis. That is a third of the population. If you look at neighboring Germany, Spain, and Belgium, it's about a quarter of the population. Italy and the UK, it's about a fifth. In the US and Australia, it's a lot lower. It's about 15%. You have to look at Bulgaria, Greece, and Croatia to find countries in Europe that smoke more.
And not only is the smoking rate very high here in France, it's also been stable across the past couple of years, which is true for both adults and for young people.
And this regular sight of young people smoking all this time might be another reason why people associate it with French culture. Now, bear in mind that it's illegal to sell cigarettes to anybody younger than 18 years old, but the truth of the matter is the average age that French people experiment with smoking is very young. It's around 12 years old when you enter middle school. By the time French people enter high school, some of them say that they're completely hooked, though others say that they won't bow down to peer pressure.
I can't quit. I can try to cut down, but I'm addicted to the taste and the feeling of smoking a cigarette.
I don't really want to quit. At 17, you don't realize it's bad and will lead to problems down the line.
I've never smoked and never will. It's bad. It costs too much money. All that just to blow out smoke. It's useless.
Now, all of this, of course, is a cause of alarm for public health officials who've been trying to crack down on smoking in France for years because obviously the consequences are so alarming.
They certainly are. It's estimated that 73,000 people die each year in France due to smoking-related illnesses. That's 200 people a day, 22 times more than road accidents. Now, smoking is the #1 cause of avoidable death here in France, and critics say that the state isn't doing enough. And the truth is that so far, the state's anti-tobacco policies haven't really worked, and part of that has to do with the fact that French people don't like being told what to do. Now, after banning smoking in offices and in public spaces, the government tried to tackle smoking by changing the packaging. Since January 2017, all cigarette packages are neutral. They look exactly alike. There are no logos, just you can see these photos, quite alarming photos and warnings. This policy worked in Australia, and it's had mixed results here in France.
For us smokers, what counts is what's on the inside, not the outside. It won't work.
I have 4 kids. They all smoke rolling tobacco. I don't think it'll stop them. But if it stops a few people, why not?
The government's latest strategy has been to hit people in their pocketbooks and steadily increase the price of cigarettes.
And it could get really pricey, Jeannie. The aim is to have a pack of cigarettes cost 10 euros by 2020. Keep in mind that it was about 4 euros around 2013, so that's quite an increase. Critics say this is just going to drive people to find cheaper cigarettes elsewhere in other countries, for instance, but some say it's actually an opportunity to quit.
It'll encourage us to cut down or quit altogether. It's potentially a good thing, especially for young people who'll be discouraged.
It might work for young people, but not for us. We're too addicted, too used to it. It won't stop us from smoking.
At €10 a pack, I'll keep smoking. If it's the only pleasure you have in life, why give it up?
Now, some habits do die hard, and recently authorities have started to wonder if the key to changing smoking culture is culture itself.
Because smoking is arguably romanticized in French culture, particularly on the silver screen. When you think about movie stars like Brigitte Bardot, Depardieu, Catherine Deneuve, Alain Delon, you often imagine them puffing them away. And according to a recent study, it's true for recent films as well. According to this study, 7 out of 10 new films show people smoking, and it's not just the bad guys like it is sometimes in American movies. Now, France's health minister, Agnès Buzyn, recently raised a lot of eyebrows when it seemed that she was suggesting that French filmmakers should stop filming and featuring smokers in their movies. This hit a really raw nerve here in France. Some critics said this was the first move towards a puritanical, moralistic cinema, but others said that French movies actually normalize smoking cigarettes.
When you're sitting in a cinema and you see someone light up, it triggers areas in your brain that make you want to smoke a cigarette. This is undeniable and has been proven by dozens of studies.
It's a dangerous process. It will lead to bland films disconnected from reality.
The reality is changing a little bit, and there's been a huge boom, for instance, in the use of electronic cigarettes. There are vape stores all over the country popping up like mushrooms, but there's still a long way to go before France changes, I guess, what you could call its laissez-faire attitude towards smoking.
Indeed. Flo, thank you so much for that. Florence Villeminot with that latest French Connections looking at the cigarette culture here in France. If you have any other questions about any other kind of culture here, be sure to tweet Flo at Flo Villeminot.